It was a dark, dreary, and unusually cold day as I look out across this windswept plain. But this depressing atmosphere is being caused by more than just the weather. This dark mood is being enhanced perfectly by the spiritual darkness that's hanging in the air. Under these clouds today, evil decisions will be made. Decisions of compromise, decisions of conformity, but hopefully, as we shall see, decisions of heroism as well. As I watch, drizzle begins to fall as the gathered officials begin to enter onto this plain called Dura. They have been gathered here for a dedication. But what they do not know is that they've been called here to do more than just participate in a ceremony. They have been called here by the king to show allegiance to him. They will show him that they serve only him, that they worship only him. And if they don't, they'll be put to death. As the men gather together in the middle of this plain, they see it. Rising up above them out of the ground, standing 90 feet above their heads, is a golden statue. This is to be the object of their affection, a man-made conglomeration of metal and sweat that has no more spiritual value than the ground that they walk upon. An inanimate, lifeless, powerless object that can do nothing for them. But this isn't the only object on the plains of Dura today. Set off to the left of this golden statue is a blazing furnace. A furnace that is burning so hot that even from a great distance away, the heat from its flames can be felt. It stands there giving off a warmth that beckons the men to draw closer on this chilly day. But make no mistake, this fire was not provided as a source of comfort. It was provided as a source of death. It will be an instrument of punishment for those who choose not to obey, those who choose not to bow down before the golden idol of the king. Now, for most of the officials in attendance, bowing down before a golden idol is no big deal. They had no system of beliefs that ever taught them that they should only worship the one true God. But for three of the men standing there, bowing before this golden idol was a big deal. For they had been taught when they were very young that they should worship only the God of their ancestors, only the one true God. And this golden idol was not him. Three officials who were born as Jews and in their late teens had been taken captive and brought to Babylon. Three men who, with God's help, have risen in power within King Nebuchadnezzar's court and now hold positions that most men would do anything to keep. But these positions were positions of obedience, an obedience that up to this point they had freely given. But to do this, to bow before this golden idol, was an obedience they couldn't give. At this time, a decree is given, and it's stated that when the music begins to play, every knee of every man must bow down and worship the idol. If they do not, they will be sentenced to death and thrown into the fiery furnace. The tension mounts as the three men look at each other, but without saying a word, they all know what they must do. After a short moment, the music begins to play. And one by one, every knee of every official bows to the ground as they stick their face into the mud. All of the officials except for the three. They will not bow. Instead, they stay standing, hoods covering their heads, arms outstretched, faces pointed toward the heavens, standing amidst a sea of prostrate leaders, unbowed, waiting for the inevitable. Quickly they are dragged from the crowd. They are pushed toward the king's structure. They struggled to keep pace and they stumbled, all the while pushing down the dread of knowing that they may have just left their privileged positions forever. As they reach the king's platform, they are pushed up the steps and ushered into the king's presence. And here, the final stage is set. Decisions will be made here. Evil decisions, compromising decisions, or heroic decisions. A final opportunity is given by the king. Nebuchadnezzar, eyes full of rage that anyone would dare come into his court and defy his orders, said to these three men, "I will give you one more chance to bow." And then he leaned forward in his throne and through gritted teeth said, "But if you do not, I will throw you into the blazing furnace. And then, what God will be able to save you from my power?" When the three men heard this, they raised their eyes and they said this to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, our God has the power to rescue us. Our God has the power to save us from your hand. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow before your idol. We will not ever worship your gods." When the king hears this, he literally dives into a fit of rage. He orders that the fires be turned up 7 times hotter than they have ever been turned up before. He calls out for his strongest men to come and bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like cattle, their hands and their feet are bound together as they are drugged toward the mouth of the flame. As they get closer, the heat in the air begins to rise. First, it's uncomfortable, then unbearable, and finally it gets to the point where even the strong men can go no further. And right before they themselves are incinerated in the flames, they take Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and toss them into the fire. Standing up for what you believe in is sometimes a very difficult thing to do. It requires a great inner strength, an inner strength that these three young men had. An inner strength that told them that even though they could die for their decision, they would not bow. They would not choose the path of compromise. They would not choose the path of evil. Instead, they chose the more difficult yet heroic path of obedience. But a fiery death is not the end of this story. For you see, there will be no more suffering on this day. For the God of these three Jewish men is not going to let them die. He is going to protect them, and he is going to answer the king's question of who has the power to save them from his hand by answering, he has that power, and he will do it now. In the fire, where there was once three, there is now four. As light shone out of the fire as God walked among them. King Nebuchadnezzar, looking in disbelief, falls back into his throne. He stares for a minute, 2 minutes. He can't believe his eyes until finally, with great fear, he calls the three men to come out of the furnace and stand before him. And when they get there, weak from the ordeal, he realizes that they don't even smell of smoke and their clothes are not even singed. The three men stand in front of him. And at that moment, the conviction of God falls upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he stands upon his throne, his knees weak, his hands trembling, and he makes this proclamation to all of the people. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own. Therefore, I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race, whatever their nation, whatever their language, speaks a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb. For there is no other God who can rescue like this. Doing the right things at the most difficult of times only happens through God's help and through godly morals. In order to stand up in the face of peer pressure, or to be able to answer those questions in your mind, those thoughts that say, maybe this time it would be best if I don't do the right thing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew in their heads that it was wrong for them to bow before that golden idol, but I don't believe that's what kept them standing. I believe what kept them standing was what was planted in their heart. That's what gave them the moral fortitude to stand in the face of death. I have given my life to work with kids. And over the next several minutes, I have one goal, and that is to completely change your view of kids from the viewpoint you had when you walked in here. And I believe 100% that I can do it. I love the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In fact, that's one of the reasons I became a children's pastor. There's and many other stories like them: David, Esther, Joseph, all people, young men and women who stood up for their beliefs in incredibly difficult circumstances. I wanted to be able to impart those type of values into children so that they could do the same thing. All of us would love to have our children grow up to have the moral fortitude of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, wouldn't we? Yes. The question is, how do we do it? Well, the Bible gives us an answer. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were taught in a certain way. And if we look in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verses 5 through 9, it says this: Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. These commandments that I give to you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. What is this verse saying? It's saying that during this impressionable time, we have the responsibility to impress on children God's commands. And what happens when we do that? It says that it will become upon their hearts. That's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had. 3 young men who were torn from their families and taken to a foreign land, who had the fortitude to stand. Why? Because somewhere in their past, their family, their extended family, impressed into their hearts that there was only one God and that only one God should be served. But I don't believe it was just what was told them, but also when it was told them. Proverbs 22:6 says this: "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." I laugh at the simplicity of this verse. It's not rocket science, is it? When I was in college, I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. Then I got my master's degree in biblical studies. And as I look back on my college career and I think about all of the great developmental and moral psychologists that I studied, the 2 greatest being Jean Piaget and Lawrence Kohlberg, the giants in moral and cognitive development studies. All of the time, all of the effort, their whole life that they devoted to this could have all been saved if they just would have read this one verse. That what we put into our kids when they are young is what they will become when they're older. Since we're on that subject, let's go ahead and take a look at what developmental psychologists say about this important time in our life called childhood. I want to show you a graph up here. As you look at this, there are 2 different lines. The first one I want to look at is the cognitive development. Cognitive development is our ability to deduce, to reason, to problem solve, to think, basically. It says that our cognitive development peaks out somewhere around the age of 35. Now, it doesn't mean that your cognitive development completely stops at 35. It just means that it's starting to go down. However, look at that green line, the moral development that begins at about the age 2 and peaks at age 10, and then continues to drop till about age 18, where the majority of our values and morals are set. What does that graph tell you? I know what it tells me. We don't have a lot of time to build into our children. And this is so important. I want to do something for you. I want to bring up a good friend of mine and his daughter, as well as a prop that I think will help further explain this whole graph thing. I want to introduce to you Mr. Jeff Grubb and his beautiful daughter, Tatum. Jeff Grubb and his wife, Lori, have been serving with my wife, Carrie, and I before Tatum was even born. They've been here for 15 years. And if there is a family, like many of you, who epitomize what it means to orbit your life around the church and make sure that you are here, it's this family. Jeff serves up in 4th and 5th grade each and every weekend. His wife serves on the stage in K1 each and every weekend, and their daughters are benefiting from it. And you know what the really cool thing is? Their daughters are growing up. We're born here and are growing up in this church. And they're giving them a gift that is invaluable, because when they reach 18, 19 years old, they are going to be able to look back upon their whole life and they're going to be able to go, Fellowship Church was my church. Not Fellowship Church and this church and this church and this church and this church. What a great gift we can give to our kids by staying planted. Whatever the problems, whatever the disagreements you might have, stay planted. If nothing else, for your kids. All right, let's go back up here because I want to walk up here and look at this prop I have. These two cylinders are going to represent Tatum, okay? Now, as you notice from that graph that I had up there on the screen, there is a window that opens up about age 2, is fully open at age 10, and begins to close until about age 16. This window is going to be represented by this slider that I'm going to open up. Age 10, it's going to start closing, all right? Now, for a lot of us, we don't really give a whole lot of thought to moral training in our kids, do we? Oftentimes, it's just kind of haphazard. And if we do any form of moral training, most of the time, it's done in discipline. And so, as I do this, I want this to represent a typical parent who kind of hopes and assumes that somewhere along in life, during this important time, the child will get the right morals. So, as this window is opening up, every now and then, we get some good morals and values. Here we are at age 10, and the window is now beginning to close. Still going, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and it's mostly closed. Well, we got some good morals and values down there, don't we? Now, I want you to put some more into this, Jeff, because this is really important. This down here represents Tatum's heart. This represents Tatum's head, her cognitive development. Moral development, cognitive development. Everybody got that? All right. As you look at this, as you get older and your cognitive development continues to happen, you will learn new morals and you will learn new values. But the ability to get them into here is greatly diminished. Now they're predominantly up here, just like they are up here. And the problem with that is yes, it's good that they're up there, but all of us know that when our morals and values are strictly up here, they're a lot easier to rationalize away. But Tatum, if you'll come stand over here, and I want you to model what I know your parents do for you on a regular basis. This is a family that has a strategic plan on pouring morals and values into their kids during this critical time. And I'm going to give you how to do that in a very easy step at the end of this message. So, Jeff, here I go. I am now opening up the window. Ages 1, 2, 4, 6, 10. Now it's beginning to close. 14. Still going in, 16, and there we go. Now, obviously, none of us are perfect, so we're not going to get every moral and value in the universe into our kids during this time. But hopefully you can see the big difference between here and there, and here and there. And here's the big thing right here. When Tatum is one day faced with the decision about whether or not to do right or wrong, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were, if that moral value is down here, she will not, in her conscience, be able to give into the desire to do the wrong thing because the pain and the guilt will be too great because it's not up here, it's down here. It's part of her emotional DNA. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you, guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you. One and awesome. Thank you. You know what's so frustrating for me is we have as a society many different ways to cognitively teach our children through school, through university, through programs. But yet we have so very, very, very few entities that can teach moral values during this critical time. And I think that's the problem in our world today, isn't it? When we look at our political leaders, how many of our political leaders look like this? They'll say they know the right morals and values in their heads, but when push comes to shove, it's so much easier just to put it aside and let somebody else take care of it or do the wrong thing. But if those morals and values can be built into our leaders, into our children when they're young, we can make a difference. We can change the world. That's what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those morals, those values were poured into their hearts. And that gave them the moral fortitude to stand. Question is, we know that developmental psychologists say, yep, you got a short window. We know that God, who's even greater authority than those developmental psychologists, says, yep, you got a short window of opportunity. Why don't we take kids more seriously? Well, I think I know the answer. I've got a couple of pictures. First, they're silly. Second, they run around like crazy and often have that crazy look in their eye. Third, they're disobedient. Looks like my daughter's room. And they also, most of the time, act like they're not listening, or at least you think they're not listening to anything I have to say. And if by some strange chance you ever wander into the preschool during diaper changing time, you realize that kids are just plain smelly. All of the chaos on the outside that we see in kids is not an indication of what is going on the inside. Satan wants to throw us off, and he wants us to look at our children and say to ourselves, they're just kids. He knows the incredible time of importance of 2 years old to 16 years old, and he is going to do everything to throw you off your game and get you thinking about everything else but the most important thing you need to be doing, which is putting godly morals and values into your kids' hearts. Don't let him do that. Take a stand in front of him for your kids. So how do we do this? 2 practical things that you can do. How do we get our kids the morals and values that they need during this critical time? Number 1, get your kids here every weekend. Parents, I understand. I understand. There's a lot of things going on in life. There's sports, there's academics, there's family, there's reunions, there's vacations, there's the lake. But you know what? When you conceived that child, you signed up for a responsibility. And from 2 to 16, it is your job to pour those morals, to pour those values into them. And the best way to do that is to get them here to church. Not once a month, not once every 3 weeks, every week. It's not that hard. It really isn't. You need to volunteer. Your kids, when they're up here and you're volunteering, are getting leadership training, biblical moral training that goes beyond what we offer in children's church. We have children's pastors who spend all week long diligently preparing a moral biblical lesson for your kids. You need to make sure that they're there. And parents, here's something else. And I understand, I feel for you, I really do, because I know how it is. Mom, I want to go to church with you. Dad, I want to go to church with you. I don't feel good. I got a tummy ache, which always comes conveniently about 3 minutes from the door as you're walking into church. You need to say, you know what? No. You're going to children's church because Pastor Ed develops a lesson that is designed for youth and for adults, not for kids. And if you make the effort to bring them to church and they're sitting beside you, you've wasted that whole hour that they could have been down getting age-appropriate biblical moral leadership training. Make sure you kids are here and in children's church. All right, enough of that. Number 2, this is the big one, because this is the one that literally could change the world, and I'm going to tell you how. We have another site called leadershipforkids.tv. On there are over 250 leadership videos that teach biblical moral principles. Just like the story that I told today, there are 250 leadership lessons just like that on this website. You can access those, and your child could watch a leadership lesson every day You don't have to do anything. You could watch it on your iPhone, you can watch it on your iPad, on your way to school. All you got to do is punch it up and hand it to them. That's all you do. We want all of our kids to grow up to be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I hope. I know I do. We want our kids to grow up to be leaders, that have that moral fortitude to then in the face of incredibly difficult situations that they say, I'm going to do the right thing because I know nothing else. But if we don't give this incredible opportunity to our kids during this critical time in their life, we might as well be saying, go ahead into your adult life and just deal with it. Struggle with it, deal with the problems, handle it whichever way you think you need to handle it. You know, last weekend was Memorial Day weekend, and that's a weekend where we honor those who have given their lives for our freedoms that all of us have to come and worship in a place like this and learn lessons like this. We also talked about those who are currently serving and those who are missing in action. And as I was sitting there thinking about that, I had this thought: what if we had the knowledge, the technology, the skills to make a suit that would protect our soldiers? It could protect them from bullets, from landmines, from rockets and suicide bombers. But unbelievably, we just didn't understand the importance of giving it to them. So instead of doing anything and everything to get this suit into the hand of our soldiers, we send them off to battle, have them stand on the front lines, get wounded, hopefully survive, maybe get put back together. Before we send them off, then we gave them the suit. Then, if we neglected our soldiers in that way, what kind of people would we be? But let me ask you another question. What if we had a suit that we could give to our children that would protect them as they encounter life? A suit built with knowledge, skills, and values that would guard them against the dangers of this world. But again, because we just didn't fully understand the importance of what we had to give, we just decided to allow other things to take priority, to push it aside. Well, I feel I need to tell you, we have such a suit of hope, of character, of leadership, a kind of suit that is better than military armor because it is designed to protect a heart that will beat beyond this world. But if we don't give this suit to our kids during this most critical time in their life, we might as well be saying to them, we're going to let you face the bullets of bad choices, the rockets of regret, the landmines of negative influences. And if you survive, we'll try to put you back together as best we can, and then we'll get serious about giving you the protection that you need. Then. Thank God we are not a people of then. We are a people of now. We will take our stand in the battle for our children, and we will face the enemy who comes against us. We won't wait for pain to teach our children about the God who heals. And we won't wait for mistakes to teach them about the character qualities found in His Word. We will do it now, when they're listening, when they're learning. We will give them the tools. We will give them the knowledge. We will give them an actual relationship with the almighty ruler and creator of this world. Give your best and fight for your children. Don't ever say to yourself, they're just kids. For it is now that they deserve your passion, your commitment, and your utmost drive. For the kingdom of God belongs to them.